You can sit wherever you're comfortable. So typically on Thursdays in Arnona, I teach a weekly class called Modern Masters. We have a nice group that comes on Thursdays. We also have, Baruch Hashem, a lot of viewership of this series on YouTube. And by the way, I'll take this moment to remind everyone, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, write down this OUisrael Shiurim is our YouTube channel, OUisrael Shiurim. There are literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of views of Shiurim and not just full shiurim, but even small clips from shiurim. If someone doesn't have the patience to sit and watch a whole shiur, we have our incredible video team that pulls key ideas from all the various shiurim and puts out shorts. And we have hundreds of thousands of views on that YouTube channel. But subscribe to it, because then you get all the updates each week in terms of the new shiurim.
So what's it, YouTube?
You go to YouTube and then you put in OUisrael Shiurim and subscribe, and you'll get an email every week with a list of all the new shiurim that go up. Okay, so it's kedai to subscribe. Obviously, Rabbi Finkelstein is not able to be here, unfortunately, today. So you guys are stuck with me for a second time this morning, Baruch Hashem. Some of you and those of you that are just joining us, this is my second share of the morning, so bear with me in terms of the voice. Normally on Thursdays, as I mentioned, I teach a course called Modern Masters, where we meet 19th, 20th, and 21st century scholars, mostly masters of Jewish thought, but sometimes we'll even meet halachic masters as well. And we meet them through their writings. We learn about them a little bit biographically, and then also come to know them, so to speak, through some of their writings. Obviously, we're not going to, in one 45-minute shiur together, we're not going to know everything there is to know about that particular personality, but we get a taste of who this personality was and what he represented. So one of the personalities that I am personally very connected to, one of what I'll call my personal spiritual heroes, is the Admor of Husiyatin, the Rebbe of Husiyatin, Rabbi Yaakov Friedman of Husiyatin. Rabbi Yaakov Friedman of Husiyatin was a Hasidic Rebbe who came on Aliyah in 1938, just out of the Nazis. He comes together with his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe of Husiyatin, and they settle in downtown Tel Aviv. And he becomes the Rebbe, I believe, in the early 1940s, and after his father-in-law passes away, and lives till 1957 at 19 Bialik Street in downtown Tel Aviv. If you go to 19 Bialik Street today in downtown Tel Aviv, there's a construction site in the site where their shtibel used to be. You can actually see the door frame of where the shtibel used to be. I think it functioned till about 5 years ago. This Rebbe was succeeded by his only son, Rabbi Yitzchak Friedman, and who was the final Rebbe of Husiyatin. Rabbi Yitzchak Friedman had no children, and the dynasty ceased after he passed away in the 1970s.
Where did the Hasidim go after?
So they went to other. They all go back to the Rebbe of Rishon. They're all descended from Rishon. So some became Hasidim of some of the other Rebbes that are descendants of the Rebbe of Rishon. Kedugma, Stedagora is a big school. Bian is a big school. Anyways, so this particular Rebbe.
Where was Husiyatin?
I was in Poland. Galicia, I think. But I'll tell you a very interesting story. So how did I become connected to this particular sefer? It's very important to understand. So one of my great teachers and mentors is Rabbi Dr. Tzir Weinreb. So Rabbi Weinreb, in one of his many lectures for us at the OU, mentioned this Rebbe Derech Agav and his story. We'll share a little bit of his story before I actually learned some of his Torah. And afterwards, I went over to him afterwards and I said, this sounds like a fascinating personality. And he says, Dafka, you, Sam, you have to get this sefer. This is going to become your Rebbe. That's what he said. Rabbi Weiner told me, you're going to love this sefer. So I said to him, okay, so where do I get the sefer? He says, well, it's out of print. I said, so Rabbi, where am I supposed to? He says, but there is a rabbi in Rabbi Yehuda Brandes in Mechlel Herzog, the academic college in Gush, in Alon Shvut, who wrote a biography about this Rebbe. And maybe if you contact Rabbi Brandes, he'll be able to tell you where to get the sefer. So Rabbi Weiner sent me Rabbi Brandis' phone number. I called Rabbi Brandis on the phone. He was kind enough to send me a copy of his biography about the Rebbe. And then he said, there's actually a Hasidic Shayid deep in Kiryat Belz in Yerushalayim that sells this sefer out of his house. And his name is Rabbi Yaakov Schreiber. And I'll give you his phone number. It took me months to finally get this person on the phone. And I had to go to his house to be able to pick up the sefer. And I got there. He said to me, most people, when they buy the sefer, they want a plain paper bag to carry it out with them in the street because the sefer is very controversial in Hasidic circles. Because as we'll learn together this afternoon, almost every Torah the Rebbe shares has something positive to say about the enterprise of Tzionut, of building up the Yeshuv here in Eretz Yisrael, and he's able to see the good even in the challenging times. Again, he lives from 1938 to 1957. So what's also beautiful about the Sefer is many of the different Torah give us a glimpse of, you're talking about 19 years of some of the most challenging years in Jewish history. You're talking about the Shoah. He literally just escapes just ahead of the Nazi onslaught of Poland. You're talking about the early day, the battle, both in warfare as well as diplomatically for the establishment of the state of Israel, and the early days of Medinat Yisrael, where we have people still living in tent villages, and it wasn't like today where we all walk around with a traveling office in our pockets. It was a very, very different mitzvah, and this Rebbe, the Ohalei Yaakov of Husiyatin, gives us a glimpse and gives us the capacity to see the bigger picture and see each of those challenging steps along the way as leading to something greater. And he's a really fascinating and inspirational figure. And the sefer is called Ohalei Yaakov. And Baruch Hashem, over the past number of years, I've shared a lot of his Torah, both in my column in Torah Tidbits, as well as to the various shirim. His yard site was this past Sunday. So I thought it was appropriate that this week we should learn, as part of my Modern Master series, that we should learn about this Modern Master. Okay? So that's the introduction. We're going to jump right in. This is a pasuk in Vayikra. The pasuk says, in the ways of those that live in Mitzrayim, where you once what? Lived. Okay, lo ta'asu, you shall not do. Also the ways of those living in Canaan, the other nations living in Canaan, you shall not act like them. You should not walk in their ways. Now, many of us are probably familiar with the last part of this pasuk. Okay, do not walk in the ways of the other nations. But the first part of the pasuk, the first two parts of the psukim, K'ma'aseh Eretz Mitzrayim lo ta'asu, K'ma'aseh Eretz Canaan lo ta'asu. Why doesn't the pasuk you say K'ma'aseh Eretz Mitzrayim ve'Eretz Canaan lo ta'asu? Why K'ma'aseh Eretz Mitzrayim lo ta'asu, K'ma'aseh Eretz Canaan lo ta'asu? It seems redundant. So the Klei Yakar, in a very, very famous comment, says the pasuk emphasizes two important things. Number one, that we shouldn't be comfortable in Mitzrayim. The first thing is that what? We shouldn't view our time in Mitzrayim till we come to Israel. And by the way, this is talking about not just Mitzrayim, this is talking about for all eternity. We shouldn't view our time in Galus as a dirat keva, as where we're meant to be. That's where we are right now. Ultimately, the goal of Jewish life is to be where? To be in Eretz Yisrael. And it also, he says, but in terms of coming to Eretz Yisrael, we shouldn't feel compelled to come to Israel. We shouldn't come to Israel because we're fleeing the enemies around us. We should come to Israel. Why? Because we want to fulfill the mitzvah of Yishuv Haaretz. Many of you probably have the good fortune to know our teacher, speaking of another dear mentor of mine whom I miss dearly, Rabbi Shalom Gold, Zecher Tzaddik Racha. So Rabbi Gold, famously, one of the last times I visited with Rabbi Gold, probably the last time I visited with him, was in his apartment in where he had moved. He had moved from Har Nof. He had moved to Beit Tovei Yair the last few years of his life. I went one afternoon to spend time with him, and this after he stopped giving his weekly shiur, and he reminded me of a discussion that he and I had numerous times, that Ramosha Feinstein famously paskined that the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael today is a mitzvah kiyumi, meaning one who comes to live in Eretz Yisrael fulfills the mitzvah, but it's not a mitzvah chiyuvi, but you're not obliged to do so right now. And Rabbi Gold, anyone who's ever met Rabbi Gold, you can imagine that psak for Rav Moshe Feinstein was devastating to him. He was perplexed for decades. He said, I couldn't understand what Rav Moshe was saying until finally he said one day I had an aha moment. Rav Moshe was telling us a Jew should come to live in Eretz Yisrael not because they feel forced to. They should come here. Why? Because they really want to. Okay, they want to be makayim the mitzvah. They're not coming because it's a chov. They have no choice. It's I'm in danger. I'm fleeing my reality in Chutz La'aretz. They should come to live in Eretz Yisrael because we have an opportunity to be makayim the mitzvah of Satzuras Ba'aretz. Okay, so with that as our context, that beautiful story from Rabbi Gold and explaining how he understood and was satisfied finally after decades with understanding Rav Moshe's famous psak, I want to go to this. We're not going to learn this whole thing. We'll jump around in it a little bit. This teaching from the Ohalei Yaakov. This is from Achrim Kedoshim in 5699. So we're talking about 87 years ago, right? And the Ohalei Yaakov speaks to this Klei Yakar. We're going to start about 12 lines down from the top in the middle of the line. And he's talking about the answer of the Klei Yakar. V'zeh she'amar HaKasuv, K'maaseh Eretz Yisraelim, U'ma'u U'maaseh Ara. What was so bad that they did in Mitzrayim that we're not supposed to do? Asher Yishaftem Ba, the place where you found yourself living, should be Kashtem L'Yeshev Sham Yeshiva Shokeva. Oh, that what? You shouldn't want to live there in Chutz La'aretz as your permanent home. Ukamas Eretz Canaan, and what about what was so bad about what they were doing in Canaan? Ka'otamas shasitem biyachas Eretz Canaan, umao ma'isa asher ani mevi etchem shama bal kor chacham. That what? That you shouldn't come to Eretz Canaan because what? I'm bringing you there. That you're being compelled to come there. Okay, Hashem is saying what? What should be our attitude towards leaving behind Galus and coming to Eretz Yisrael? It should be what? The place where we want to be. Not because we're fleeing and not because we don't belong. This is the place we belong. Okay. So now I just want to jump ahead a little bit. And let's go to the next paragraph. Ilu hayu mitbonenim b'dvarim v'asarot kamo ele b'mukdamat. If we had only contemplated and taken to heart these words and warnings a little bit sooner, he says. If only the Jewish people had taken this clear warning to heart a little bit sooner, we would have been spared a lot of damage and a lot of pain. There are many excuses that every single individual, he's talking about the Jews in Europe, have had. 1939. Yeah. So as the Nazis have just come to power, okay? There's this one who said, I didn't come to Israel. Why? Because my parnasa was better in Chutz La'aretz. This one says, no, my family's not going to all make Aliyah, so I don't want to leave behind my family. This one because of their role in the community as a community leader. And then there are those that say it's all these factors. Ulam Rabbim. Now listen to the Rebbe's words. The spiritual chutzpah that he has here. Ulam Rabbim nimna'u mila'alot le'Eretz Yisrael mitzad ahavatam et artzot hagolah. But many of them, they did not come. They refused to come to Eretz Yisrael, make Aliyah. Why? Because they really love the Galus. They really love the Galus. And even in our most recent days, when it's become so clear how dangerous the danger is coming, they didn't budge until when? Till the water came up to almost drowning. The load. Ele shahayu anashim shehitlonenu aleinu ba'aliyotenu le'Eretz Yisrael. And then there were those that came to us with complaints against us when we came to Eretz Yisrael. B'chashvam she'ani garamti le'aliyato shechotni harav atzadik shlita le'Eretz Yisrael. He's talking about his father-in-law. He says there were people that were mad at him, meaning the Ohalei Yaakov, and they accused him of convincing his father-in-law, the previous Rabbi, to make Aliyah to Israel. He says, Otam anashim shirak ma'apat hitkashrutam v'avatam la'arzat hagolah hitnagdu la'aliyat le'Eretz Yisrael. These people who were against us, why were they against us? Because they loved the Golus just a little bit too much, says the Rabbi. So first of all, you see the courage of this Rebbe, that he's able to stand up to the other Gedolim and say, what? Okay, let's be honest. We all belong here, and chaval that we didn't see the writing on the wall, but more than that, it shouldn't have taken the writing on the wall for us to be here. We should be here. Why? Because we belong here. This is where we belong. And it might be very nice that we have positions of influence in the Golah. And it might be very nice that we have family. It might be very nice that we have great parnas in the Golah. But ultimately what? We belong here. Okay, so now the Rebbe continues. In order to ease their conscience, right? To make themselves feel a little better, they often will cite two sources for why they don't come to Eretz Yisrael. So the first is that there's a famous comment by one of the Balei Tosos, Reb Chaim. And we're going to talk about this Reb Chaim in a moment. Okay, it's a famous comment in the Gemara in Ksuvos. The Achshav ein a mitzvah l'dor be'Eretz Yisrael, ki yesh kama mitzvah l'tua ba'aretz, v'kama onshin she'ein anu yicholim li'yizayer b'hem v'la'amod alehem. So there's a day in the Tosfos that says what? Today we don't come until there's no mitzvah to come to live in Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because of the mitzvahs hatluos ba'aretz and the various punishments that will befall us if we're not careful with those mitzvahs. So instead of this Tosafist, this purported Tosafist saying what? We have an opportunity to go and be Makayim all the mitzvot satluas ba'aretz. Okay? He's using it as an excuse. So he says that's one excuse. That people will quote this Reb Chaim in the Tosas, and we're going to come back. Don't worry, the Rebbe is going to refute that Tosas in a moment. We're going to come back and see his lumdus in refuting his scholarship and refuting that Tosas in a moment. But then he continues, the other reason is Harbe Parke Ol She'enam Shomrim Torah Mitzvos Kavu Dirasam Yeshiva Chadash. The other reason is what? That many of the people that were involved in building up the new Yeshuv here in Eretz Yisrael were what? Weren't from. And therefore we have tainas against them because they're not from. And now listen to what the Rabbi says. Shnei animukim gam yachad einam nichonim klal v'chlal. Both of these excuses, what? Are not correct and they're not acceptable at all. Okay, regarding that first Tosos, he's going to quote the Ma'arit, an early Acharon, who says, "She'ein zu dat bali Tosfot." This note, this quote of Reb Chaim that appears in the Tosos, is not really the words of one of the Tosafists. Rak hi hagat talmid toeh. This is really just a notation of a mistaken student of the Tosafist who snuck his own comment into the Tosafot. Okay, ve'ein lismoch alav, says the Mari. Okay, that we don't rely on this quote from the Tosafot. V'chein katav Shalah, and the Shalah Kadosh says, "Lo nistaver tameh ve'en lashgiach b'dvarav." The Shalah says about that Tosafot, I don't understand his rationale, and we certainly don't rely on his words. U'b'negei limu kasheni. And what about the second complaint? The complaint of what? That the people who are building up the Yeshuv here aren't also from. We have a Beferish Gemara in Ksuvos. We all know this Gemara. Okay, the Jew should always desire to dwell in Eretz Yisrael, even if he's dwelling what? Amongst non-Jews. That's what the Rabbi says. Afilu min ha'ayoter garum shevan. Are you going to tell me if our Chazal tells us it's better to live in Eretz Yisrael, even if you're living surrounded by Nochrim, by non-Jews, they're better than what? than living with Jews, even the Jews are not the Jews like that live the Torah the way we do? How could you say such a thing? Chas v'shalom, says the Rabbi. So this is our first introduction, the strong mussar of the Ohalei Yaakov, and the passion he has for building up the yeshuv here in Eretz Yisrael, as well as how we view our fellow Jews, those Jews who may not observe Torah mitzvahs in the same way that we do, but that are committed to building the yeshuv here, and how we have to see the good amongst them. Okay, so now turn your page. Staying in Parshas Kedoshim, okay. When you come into the land of Israel, you shall plant all kinds of fruit trees. And you have to wait to eat of their fruits until the fourth year. The first 3 years you don't eat. Shalosh shanim yelachem arilim lo yechel. For first 3 years we can't eat of their peros. Okay, so the Ohalei Yaakov says from this pasuk, this is text. You turn your sheet over, okay? The Ohalei Yaakov says about this pasuk that there are 3 mitzvos that are being introduced in this pasuk. Number 1, Gimel mitzvah namrukan. Aleph, biata aretz. The first is what? Coming to the land of Israel is a mitzvah. Living in Israel is a mitzvah. Okay? Al derech omrim. Okay, Hakol Mal in Eretz Yisrael, as based on the Chazal, the Gemara, which we just mentioned, the Rabbi just mentioned in the last piece. What the Gemara in Ksuvos? What that everyone should come to live in Eretz Yisrael. And what's bet? What's the second? Lintoa Kol Eitz Ma'achal. Okay, l'shevach haaretz. The second is to what? Plant all kinds of trees to make the place what? A beautiful place. And Gimel, what's the third one? Linhog Shanei Orla. And the third mitzvah is what? The mitzvah of Orla, one of the mitzvahs of Tulas Baretz. So from this pasuk says the Ohalei Yaakov, we learn 3 different mitzvahs. Okay. But that's only midirabanan. It's only midirabanan. Okay. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting here. I believe it's only midirabanan. Okay. It's one of the mitzvahs of Tulas Baretz, really. I think we're no way Chutz, but there's 3 separate mitzvahs that are introduced in this pasuk. Okay, could be you're right, but it could that this is not necessarily shayach to Eretz Yisrael, but there's 3 mitzvahs that are introduced in the pasuk. Okay, Tov. That being said, let's take a look at the Ohalei Yaakov, and we're going to start right in the beginning. Ubezeh shekatav orachayim ki mitzvahs bias haaretz nemra b'pasuk hazeh hachriya kiramban. Okay, it's consistent with the shita of the Ramban. She mitzvah min Torah. That's a mitzvah min Torah to dwell in Eretz Yisrael. Ukedei shelo yata korei shekavarasa orachayim limor. And the Orachayim quotes our Gemara that we learned in the last piece, the Gemara in Ksuvos. Okay, why does he add in that last piece that kol that everyone should go to live there? Hosif okay, or shehi mitzvah min Torah rak b'mei cheruson shel Yisrael, that a person shouldn't make the mistake of think what? That it's only a mitzvah to live here in Eretz Yisrael when it's easy and when we have a free country here and it's very easy to be here. Okay, Hosif al derech amram chazal hakol malin. So that's why he adds our Gemara to say no, everybody should go under all circumstances. The Jew really belongs here. Shehi l'dorot. It's for all eternity. Kach ba'am roshu mitzvah min Torah, kavanato mitzvah min Torah l'dorot. Okay, the Ohalei is teaching us what? That we learn from our pasuk for all eternity that what? A Jew belongs here in Eretz Yisrael. It's a mitzvah. Okay. Now, mitzvah shniya shebapasuk kazeh he lintoa kol eitz ma'achal l'shevach haaretz. The second mitzvah is what? To plant all kinds of trees. And he quotes Unatan kol eitz ma'achal eininu seder hartza'ah levad. And this is not just a pedagogical device that we're adding to nice superlatives to the concept of coming to Israel. It's not just come to Israel, plant trees, keep orla. No, he says that it teaches us what? That this is a mitzvah b'fnei atzma. Okay, ki'im mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. V'chein hu b'tanchuma kedoshim. And we also see this in the Tanchuma, the Medrash Tanchuma, Parshas Kedoshim. Afal pi shetimtza'u oto melea kotov. Even if you find the land completely full of trees already, lo tamru ne'eshev lo neta ella hazuzi hirim minetiot. He says what? Even if you find the land already full of trees, you still have to plant trees when you come to Eretz Yisrael. I just want to skip ahead he talks about that. What is the goal of planting those trees? It's not just only to make the place nice. He says that it's what? it's part of so it's part of coming to cling to the Shekhinah. The idea of feeling close to the Shekhinah. There's a famous story of Rav Kook. Rav Kook was invited, I think in 1921, to a tree planting ceremony on Tu B'Shvat in a yeshuv called Magdi El. Okay, and they wanted a photo opportunity of the chief rabbi coming to plant a little sapling, and so Rav Kook said a few words of Torah, and then he gets up and he sees the sapling there, and he gets down wearing his long black coat, his frock, and he gets down in the dirt. And he's on his hands and knees, and he starts pushing the soil around. And some of the farmers nearby, they're like cringing. They're like, Nebuch, this rabbi, he doesn't understand. There's a hoe and there's a rake. He could use those tools. And so someone gently, politely tries to go over to him and say, Rabbi, you could use the rake, you could use the hoe. And Rav Kook puts his arm around him and says, my dear friend, no, you don't understand. After 2,000 years, we finally have the opportunity to be Makayim the mitzvah of planting trees in our Tzena Kedosha. I don't want to have any kind of hefsek. I don't want an intermediary between me and that mitzvah. I want to fulfill that mitzvah of planting that tree in the soil with my very own hands. So, what happens though if our natiyah is like Rav Kook and we're not really bucking and planting trees? Like what happens? Someone's just not. It's not what we're meant to be doing. So if you take a look at the left hand column, we're gonna pick up. The Rabbi talks about this. Even you, when you come to Eretz, the first thing you're supposed to do is plant. Maya yasu ele she'iya shar lahem lekayem hamitzvah azot b'muvnei pashut. What about those who just simply are not cut out to be what? Farmers. Okay, so what are we supposed to do? There's a mitzvah to be mekayem of what? Of planting in Eretz Yisrael. So what if we're really not cut out to be farmers? So what are we supposed to do? So what does he say? Tzrichim heim lekayma b'muvan acher. They can fulfill the mitzvah of planting in a different way. Untantem kol. They can plant all. What's kol? Kol rivoy. There are many ways of planting. Mirumaz bazeh. It's alluded to. Kamosh katuv Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Hadrachat hador liTorah. Oh, there's another kind of planting. There's physically planting trees, and there's what? Planting other kinds of roots. Okay? What are the other kinds of roots of planting? Teaching people Torah. Okay? That's also planting roots. Chein Torah. The Torah is also called what? A tree of fruits. Because from the Torah we have what? The mazon of the nefesh, the food of the soul, the sustenance of the soul. Okay, and lifting up, planting tzaddikim, okay, teaching others to be righteous, to learn the ways of the Torah. That's also called what? Netiyah, planting. Okay? And therefore, one who can't physically plant in the ordinary way, and therefore, those who are involved in inspiring our fellow Jew to build their lives here according to the Torah, to bring people closer to Yiddishkeit and to Torah and to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's also fulfillment of the mitzvah of Netiyah, planting trees. Okay, so let's skip ahead to the next piece. Turn your page over. Okay, so this is towards the end, Parshas Kisavo. Okay, there's a famous Orach Chaim one-liner that is going to be the jumping off point for the Ohalei Yaakov. And the pasuk tells us, "Vayaki tavo al haaretz asher Hashem lokecha noten lecha nachala v'ishtav yashavta bad." It shall be when you come into the land that Hashem has given to you as an inheritance, and you shall dwell therein, and you shall build your life there. Okay, Vayaki tavo al haaretz. This is the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. He says, "Amar v'haya lashon simcha." Anytime the word v'haya appears, it's what? Lashon simcha. It's an allusion to something that we should be happy about. La'ir she'ein lismoach ela b'yeshivat ha'aretz. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh. What do we learn from this pasuk? There's no simcha, there's no joy like what? The joy we feel when we are merit to what? To dwell, to fulfill the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Okay? So, this might be one of my favorite teachings from the Ohalei Yaakov. Let's see what he does with our Or HaChaim. He says, "V'hinei ata kfar zachinu lemedinat Yisrael u'kibbutz galiot u'min haroy haya lismoach." He says, now, right now in our days, okay, this is 1951, he's writing this. In our days, we've been gifted what? The gift of the state of Israel. We merit to have the state of Israel, and we've already started to experience what? Some of the ingathering of the exiles. And therefore it would seem what? It's appropriate for us to rejoice. Okay, as in accordance with our Orach Chaim, Vaya Lashon Simcha. Ein lismach ela b'yeshivat haaretz. So now the Rebbe is going to ask, Aval ha'eshar lismach. But can we really be happy? When we look at the spiritual state here in Eretz Israel in 1951, okay? Any rotzi lo radinim. He said, I don't want to chas v'shalom pass judgment on anyone, okay? We are ways what? We're required to judge others favorably. He says, Gimel sibot the matzav ruchani hamatzar v'hamidayeg. He says there are three reasons for the worrisome, the troublesome, okay, situation, spiritual situation. And listen to his three reasons. Chelak min ha'am kibel chinuch ra. First answer is what? Poor education. Right? They didn't have a proper education. Bet chelek min ha'am chai b'sviva ra. 1951, right? What was the living? People were still in tent cities. Like they were not in a good situation. A portion of our people are living in squalor. They're not, so they can't appreciate the reality and what the gifts we've been given. And the third reason, Hashoah hanora'ah sheba'al ha'umah Yisraelit b'shanim ha'achronot dam avadav yakum adayin lo kuyam. He says what? The third reason why that people have questions of Emunah or have lost faith is what? The Shoah and the experience of the Shoah, and we haven't seen an vengeance of the blood that was spilled. By the way, the vengeance of the blood spilled doesn't mean that we only the Nuremberg trials and being vengeful on the murderers themselves. What's the greatest vengeance is what? The restoration of Jewish life. Okay, he says that hasn't happened yet. Okay. So now we're just going to skip down to line 18, towards the end of the line. Al kol panim hamatzav ruchani ma'orer da'aga. That all three of those reasons might be accurate, but even so, the spiritual situation is worrisome. Ulam ein makom liyush chas v'shalom. But there's no room to what? To give up and despair, God forbid. Kvar havticha TORAH. The Torah has already promised us, ki sofan shel Yisrael lashuv, that in the end of days when Mashiach comes, the Jewish people will indeed return. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, v'shavta ad Hashem Elokecha. Now listen, this is the most exciting part of this piece. Okay, listen to the Rebbe's words. Ahitarut l'tshuva. This movement towards tshuva, lo tavo me'Amerika. This is the Rebbe's words. It's not Sam Shor's words. This is the Rebbe's words. Okay? This is not going to come from America. V'lo me'Anglia, and not from England. V'lo me'Shar Atzot, and from none of the other lands. Ki'im me'Eretz Yisrael. It's only going to come from Eretz Yisrael. L'chein amru Chazal. That's why our Chazal teach us in the Gemara and Ksubas that we began with. Li'olam yidor be'Eretz Yisrael, filo be'ir sheruba nochrim. A Jew always should live where? In Eretz Yisrael, even in a city that's mostly populated by non-Jews. Okay? And then, you shouldn't live in a chutz la'aretz, even in a city that's mostly populated by Jews. And we won't name the neighborhoods that we're all familiar with. Okay? Shekol adar be'eretz Yisrael ki'ilu yesh la elokav. V'chol adar b'chutz la'aretz doma We know the rest of that Gemara, right? She'ein lo ela kav. V'atam sheyashua ruchani la'am Yisrael tavo me'eretz Yisrael. The reason that for all this, and that we have to understand, where is that movement towards the Jewish people doing tshuva? Where's it going to come from? From Eretz Yisrael. And listen to his words: Min hamerkaz hayehudi hazeh haolech v'nivneh be'eretz Yisrael tavo be'ezrat Hashem yiparach hayeshua ruchanit v'achomarit la'am Yisrael hayeshua hamikaveh. Listen to what he says. He says, from this very place, this center of Jewish life, his words, the Rabbi's words, this center of Jewish life that we're building now here in Eretz Yisrael, that is going to be the place that the inspiration and the transformation of the Jewish people is going to come forth. The Yeshua that we've been longing for. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah. From Zion shall go forth the Torah. Amar Rabbi Levi, kol pu'ulot tovot v'nechamot she'atir HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'tein Yisrael enan ele mitzion. All good things that Hashem will bring for the Jewish people in the future, they will come forth from only one place, from Zion. I want to close with one last Torah that's not on your sheets, okay? We spoke about Hanukkah this morning, so it's appropriate to close with this Torah. This is from Hanukkah of 1954. Okay? Chasidim ma'achalin gmar chatima tova b'Hanukkah. Sorry, it's Hanukkah 1951. Okay, not the same year. Chasidim have a custom to wish one another a gamar chasima tova on Hanukkah, he says. Okay? Okay, and by the way, there's a minhag. Rav Eliyahu Kitov in his Sefer TORAH brings that there's a minhag actually to say tashlich on Zos Chanukah based on this idea. Okay, yesh the davar zeh makor b'sifrei Chasidim. We see the source of this in some of the Sifrei Chasidim of the Toldot Aaron, Rabbi Arla of who was the Talmud of the Rabbi Berdichev. Okay. Ad Chanukah hu Hoshana Rabbah. Says the quote that Ad Chanukah it's like Hoshana Rabbah, shehu Gemar Chasima, and that's the Gemar Chasima. Now listen to what he says here. Ukishanu ma'achalim achshav Gemar Tov hi bechavana kefula. But now in 1951 in Tel Aviv, when we wish one another a Gemar Chasima Tova on Chanukah, there's a dual kavana that we need to have, says the Rabbi. And now there's a parenthetic note, okay? His son put a parenthetic note in the words. He says, Anashim Yerushalayim bikshu biyama v'achronim b'shifto b'Tel Aviv l'chavot atel al yesod hamedinah. He says there are Jews that came from Yerushalayim to visit him. Now that the state's been established and well established, they came to speak to this Rebbe to say, so what does the Rebbe think about this state? What are your thoughts about the Medina? So how did he answer them? Anah, he answered, Hi atchalta de geula. There's not Rav Kook. Rav Kook was never zocha to see the fulfillment of Medinat Yisrael. Even though there are those that say Rav Kook is the first one that coined the phrase Medinat Yisrael, that the modern Yishuv should be called the state of Israel. Rav Kook, of course, died in 1935. He was never zocha to see the establishment of the state of Israel that we call today the Atchalta de Geula. But when they asked this Rebbe, the Rebbe Husiyatin, okay, what are his thoughts about this fledgling new state? He answered, it's the Atchalta de Geula. And then so now back to his words. In Kema Atchalta de Geula kfar zachinu bezrat Hashem yisparach. If it's true that we've already merited to see the beginning of the Geula through Hashem's help, Aval hirak b'muvana chomri. That's what? Only the fact that we physically have a state. We returned here physically. V'anu tzrichim l'gemar tov. We need what? The gemar of that return. And what's the gemar of that return? Not just that we're going to be here physically, but that we're going to see the Am Yisrael come back not only to Eretz Yisrael physically, but come back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'anu tzrichim l'gemar tov, she'yavo b'mheira b'yameinu, that will come speedily in our days. Hi hagula ruchanit, that is a spiritual redemption. Hi hagula shlema b'yat HaMashiach. And that's the Geula Shlema with the coming of Mashiach. My friends, what we learned from this few beautiful pieces of Torah that we learned today from the Admar Husiyatin, we learn get a glimpse into Jewish history through some of these pieces in terms of what was going on during this kufa. We get a glimpse into the beautiful thought of this great tzaddik. This great tzaddik with the capacity to look around and not see what's broken, only what's broken, but say what's broken is an opportunity for us to build and accomplish and become whom we're meant to be, and the place that we're meant to do that is only here in Artseinu Hakdosha. Have a great week.